All right, today I'm joined by a very special guest. It is Weinstein, the VP of Market Intelligence at Sophos. Maxim, thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thanks for having me.
So you were chatting with a few folks on our team, and we were kind of talking offline about what do we want to talk about, Max? And you mentioned this piece around supporting your sales organization. And we've talked about this many times on the podcast, but I always like to get folks' takes on this. And as always with the podcast, we like to open with 3 tactical tips. So do you have 3 tips for folks in Compete that they should know or be practicing to enable and support sales within their organization?
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, I think the first one is understand your sales organization. Not all organizations are the same. Not all sales orgs are the same. And the better you understand your organization, what their goals are, how they're compensated, how they're structured and organized, all of that, it's going to better position you to help them be successful. We have a tendency, I think, sometimes in CI to focus really narrowly on the products or the competitors or the market, and forget that ultimately what we're trying to do is help our sales organizations succeed in selling solutions to customers. And so the better you can understand what they're going through, the better you're going to be able to do that. A second one would be and it kind of relates to that, is to provide context. Sales reps will often ask you, give me the list, give me the bullet points, right? I just want to know, what do I need to know to win or to differentiate? But the reality is, especially with newer sales reps or people who are new to the organization, but even some of the experienced ones, there's a lot of context that goes around why those differentiators matter and in what way they matter and how customers are going to understand them. So if you can help them understand the broader picture of the market that they're selling into, or the how buyers do their jobs and why it's going to matter to them that your product is 12% faster or whatever, that's going to be really valuable. And then the third one, and I know this sounds a little contradictory to the previous point, but is this idea of do less, not more sometimes. And this is a lesson I've been learning over the past several years doing this, and I think we still, as a team, don't always do it as well as we could, which is there's always this tendency to be like, oh, you want to know the differentiators against competitor X, and give a list of 27 things, each one of them a paragraph long, explaining all the details, right? And there may be cases where that kind of detail is useful, but most of the time, those sales reps just want what is the small number of things that I can really absorb and internalize so that I can then go out to a customer and and explain why my product is better than the competitors.
That's interesting. The first point you make there about understanding the context of your selling structure, your selling situation. Could you share a little bit maybe about how that's dictated, your time at Sophos, how has that dictated what you're doing from a Compete side to support them? You mentioned some of these different pieces in play and how you should operate as in Compete to work with them. What does that look like? What does that mean specifically?
Yeah, definitely. So we have I guess they're never unique challenges, but certainly different than some organizations, right? We're an organization with a sales team, including all the supporting roles of somewhere around 1,000 people, globally distributed. And they are supporting a channel, set of channel partners, tens of thousands wide. And that scale creates a challenge, right? Because, you can't be involved in every deal. We have over 600,000 customers, I believe, at this point. So we're not going to be involved in every opportunity, every deal. You're not going to be able to reach every sales rep one-on-one, answer every question personally. So you have to figure out how to do things at scale. And that's one unique piece of it. Another unique piece is that, except for a small number of overlay teams, all of those people in that organization are responsible for selling our entire product and services portfolio. And we're a company that covers cybersecurity from endpoint to network to email to cloud, security operations, managed services. And cybersecurity is a fairly technical field. It's a very dynamic market, constantly seeing new product areas, new acronyms like CASB and SASE and EDR, XDR, MDR, all these multiple letter things, and acquisitions and consolidations and all this stuff. So it's we have a competitive wiki where we track a bunch of our competitors. I think we have over 150 competitors on there that we are tracking, and almost every week we're getting questions about competitors that aren't in that list at this point. So again, you asked, how does that inform what we do and how we do it, right? So one is we have to emphasize self-serve content like a wiki and battle card content, and making that stuff very available, even to some extent to our channel partners directly, because we're not going to touch every one of those partners individually. And so the battle cards, not the entire wiki, but the battle cards, for example, for our more key competitors are right out there on our partner portal for the partners to download directly, rather than being kind of gated behind the sales organization. But with the sales reps, some of it is also, how do we train them to go use that content and to know the content is there? So we have a new hire orientation for the sales org in particular, where we go through a little bit of, here's what CI looks like at Sophos. This is what CI means. Here's what we do. Here's where you can find resources. This is how you can use the resources, and actually helping them become aware of that. But then we also have added kind of an additional piece to it, which is a competitive hotline. So this is an email mailing list that people can email with their questions. And we always sort of train them, go look at the content first before you email us. Not everybody does it, but we get pretty good compliance with that. And but we say, look, you have a question about a competitor that isn't on the list, a technology that isn't listed, you have a set of SKUs, a quote from a competitor, right? And you're going, I don't know which of our products best align with this quote. You can email our competitive hotline. And we've done something a little different with it, which is that email list doesn't just go to our team. It goes to everyone on our team, goes to all of our product managers, all of our product marketing managers, all of the sales leaders and SE leaders in the organization, and to our SMT. And we know our CEO reads them pretty carefully. Occasionally we get notes back from him. But that does a number of things. One is it gives us support. It allows us to actually, we respond to the vast majority of these directly, but we will also get support from an SE who recently left one of the competitors and may have some insight to share. We'll get support from a PM who says, oh, that feature that, they say they have, we don't have, that's on our roadmap and is going to be out in 6 months. So we actually are able to distribute the load a little bit and get some deeper insight than would be possible just if the CI team were the only ones sort of seeing the requests and answering. It also ends up being a useful tool. So, our sales directors will tell us, hey, we take the responses that we see that we think are most useful, and we forward them to our sales team. We're competing with competitor, blah, blah, blah. We're going to, send this response we thought was great off to our sales org. So the next time they have it, they're facing that competitor, they have a reference.
That's cool that you building sort of a culture by having mechanisms in place, but also getting people kind of organically involved in the process. There's something you mentioned earlier that kind of perked my ears, that your sales force in the cybersecurity space right now are typically selling a full suite, like your the full portfolio. And in the cybersecurity space, like you mentioned, it's incredibly competitive, massive landscape. I'm sure so many competitors probably have like only slight overlap with maybe one of your product lines or one from your portfolio. What's your strategy then from a compete team where you're enabling sellers to, for lack of a better word, sell an all-in-one suite, but competitors they'll face might be the like for like, but they also might be sort of a single solution to a bigger portfolio you're selling on?
Yeah, it's an ongoing challenge, and it's not that we're necessarily selling the suite. We sell all our solutions as kind of a la carte, but of course, one of our goals as an organization, both for the customer's benefit and for ours as a business, is to sell customers more of our solutions and have them kind of consolidate around our platform. And it's tricky, right? Because sales is always going to say, look, we want to sell what the customer is asking us for, and then cross-sell or upsell opportunistically. I think our senior leadership team and our product organization would say, we want you to sell the portfolio, right? We want you to sell as much as you possibly can, anytime, anywhere. So there's always a little bit of tension there. From a CI and enablement standpoint, I think the key is to get a balance. When I started out, I think we tended to lean a little too much in the side of saying, the reason you should choose our firewall is because you can also buy our endpoint and they'll work together. And that worked some of the time, but also we had a lot of customers saying, look, I don't want your endpoint, I just want your firewall. And if you can't tell me your firewall is better on its own merits, then why should I buy it? And so, we needed to pivot a little bit in the other direction, but you don't want to go too far that way either, because if the only thing you ever talk about is the reason you should choose our firewall is because our firewall has this feature and that feature, and you never talk about the broader ecosystem and the platform, then you're not supporting your sales reps in getting that broader ecosystem play. So I think it's just a matter of balance and making sure to weave both of those sets of things into your messaging.
And on that note of balance, it seems like, and you mentioned in here, like building self-serve content, but also getting other stakeholders involved. Where do you see sort of sales training and then maybe some of the sales enablement, maybe self-serve functionality overlapping? And where does compete fit in as well in a massive organization like Sophos?
Yeah, great question. So first of all, I always think of sales training as just being a subset of sales enablement. I come from a kind of education background. And so to me, when you're education means you're helping the person learn what they need to learn and be successful in what they're trying to be successful in, right? Which in this case is selling. And so to me, enablement is everything that goes into that. And so it's battle cards and content, it's the hotline, it's training, it's individual conversations, it's meetings with sales teams, whatever it takes to help people learn what they need to learn. As far as how competitive specifically ties into that, right? I think there's two ways. There's the competitive specific set of enablement. And again, that's your battle cards. It's the conversations that where I'm meeting with a sales team to talk to them and answer their questions, or someone's sending a question to the hotline. But it also becomes part of working with product marketing on the messaging. It becomes part of, when a new product is being launched or a new feature comes out, helping to ensure that part of the messaging is, and here's how this is differentiated. And here's how some of our competitors might be doing it, especially the key ones that we're running into a lot in that particular segment. So yeah, it's definitely a mix of both of those.
And that being able to clearly articulate why you're different. I mean, this is like the core of what you do in compete, and it is core to the selling motion. Like that's how a seller often wins or loses a deal. I'm curious as well, as you're working with product marketing, product and sales to kind of craft your, to infuse your competitive point of view into these motions. How are you partnering? How do you work with specifically like sales leadership, sales managers to ensure that that's working within the deals that are happening today?
Yeah, good question. So it depends in part, of course, on what kind of deals we're talking about. As I said, we've got this massive organization, massive customer base. We can't work with sales reps on each individual deal. But of course, we do have some larger, more strategic opportunities. And in those cases, it could be, hey, call us in. Get us on the phone with the customer or the prospect. Let us talk with them, or let us meet with your sales team ahead of time to strategize how you're gonna approach this and so on. But a lot of the time, I think again, it comes down to infusing the messaging into the broader product message. So we're kind of lucky at Sophos. My org actually sits within the greater product organization. So I report to our SVP of product, and that means product marketing and the product management leaders are peers of mine, and we're interacting on a regular basis. And that gives us the opportunity to really talk these things through. As it means I or my team end up in a position to review their messaging and to provide input on, hey, how can we be playing up our differentiators, avoiding the landmines, right? All those kinds of things. And I think that helps a lot. Beyond that, it all comes back to sales enablement, right? You want to get those salespeople to the point where they're ready to do what they need to do most of the time based on what they've learned up to this point, and they know where to go when they need something in the moment, whether that's go look at a battle card or email the hotline or send me a Teams message because I'm literally on the phone with somebody right now and I just need you to give me a little bit of information.
You mentioned that you work within sort of the product function, like the Compete team sits. Obviously, Compete is an across departmental. It's touching a lot of different departments, but you're working with product or in product specifically. I'm curious, kind of during your time so far running Compete, if you had a magic wand, what would be the mechanisms, structures that you'd put in place to have a perfect collaboration between product and Compete?
Yeah, it's another great question. While I certainly can't say it's perfect, I think we've been lucky enough to ever have and build over time a very strong relationship with our product leaders, and therefore get a little closer to that nirvana than we were when I started. Look, if I could wave a magic wand, it would be great if PMs would come to us consistently earlier in the process, come to us, weeks in advance instead of days in advance when they needed a competitive comparison together or a competitive table or something like that. But I think some of the real keys there are that, one, sitting within the organization helps a lot, but I think we very gradually built those connections. And we did that a few different ways. Like one of them was early on, it was like, okay, let's just set up a monthly check-in with each of the product leaders. And so it was me and my senior manager of competitive research who reports to me, and the head of each of our business unit product teams. And and the product marketing manager who supported that business unit as well. And I was just get on the call once a month. What's going on? What's on your roadmap? What are you guys thinking about, concerned about? Help us understand what you're worried about. What can we be doing to support you? And that went a long way. Another thing we had to do that we found has been incredibly valuable is we actually created a form for product teams to request research from us. because we had this problem where, we'd get a Teams message, an email message, whatever, from a PM saying, hey, can you do a comparison in this product area with these competitors or something like that? And often the request was missing a lot of key pieces of information. When does it need to be done by? Who's the audience? Like, is this for you to use for deciding what to do next? Or is this something you're planning to use in sales enablement? Or is it something you're planning to bring to the board? We need to know like what level we need to get to. What are the key dimensions you're interested in? Like which competitors, what kind of analysis are you looking for? What format do you want? When you say you want a comparison, do you want a PowerPoint slide, a detailed Excel spreadsheet, a 10-page report? Like, what are you looking for? And by having that form that actually asks you all these questions with some drop-down lists in some cases and just a little more structure, we started getting much more useful requests. That allowed us to serve them more effectively and more quickly, because we didn't have to sort of do this back and forth on figuring out what the request was. And ultimately, I think, helped build trust in both directions, helped us better understand the product org and trust them more, and then help them trust us that we were going to be able to get them what they needed.
I mean, it makes sense building sort of, it's context setting as well for the request side of things. If you open a can of worms, in some aspects, it's good that people are requesting stuff in relation to competitors. It means that your job, your team is needed, but it also can become a bit of a Wild West. Like you need to, one, make sure there's the appetite for this and people understand the importance of what the compete team can do and provide. But then also you need to start, I don't want to say honing in, because that feels like you're herding sheep a little bit, but set guardrails to help me help you. Really, that's kind of the core of it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you said something interesting in there too, which is help them understand what the compete team can do, right? And actually having a form with some drop downs and stuff actually does some of that, right? Because it allows them to see, oh, they could do a more detailed report if we wanted. They could do something for sales enablement, right? Maybe they were thinking in terms of background research, but they could help us with the messaging side also. And so definitely it's been a gradual learning process, and the more time we've spent together, the closer we've become organizationally. All of that has helped us build that relationship where I think there is a lot of trust and a lot of respect in both directions, and we get to be more involved in the processes.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time today, Max. This was awesome. We covered quite a bit, and I feel like we can dig in even more at a later date as well. So for listeners, if you have specific questions on some of the stuff that Max touched on, where can they reach out to you, Max? Let them ask these questions for you. Let you know how good you're on the pod too.
Yeah, sure. They can find me on Twitter. They can find me on Mastodon at Maxim Weinstein at mstdn.social and at Maxim Weinstein on Twitter/X, and and of course on LinkedIn as well. So happy to chat with folks and get their input and help answer any questions I can.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time today, and we'll catch everyone next week.